Hello and welcome to this video, Traceability of Food. Now, my name's Andy Bowles and I'm a food lawyer. Now, this is the 7th in a series of 100 videos that I'm producing on the topic of UK food law. You may be watching this video as part of our online training service, and if that's the case, if you look below where the video is posted, you'll see a whole range of additional resources and links to additional webinars. This video is only 10 minutes long, but there is another webinar available to subscribers to our website, which is about an hour long, goes into a lot more detail. If you're watching this on YouTube, well, that's fine as well. So, traceability. Just to make the point, first of all, traceability is a food safety issue. So remember that whilst traceability sits within the general food law category, it touches across the whole range of food law categories. In other words, food hygiene, food standards, and import and export. Because traceability is fundamental. Food can only be assured as safe if we know where it's come from, because that's what traceability is all about. It's about understanding where our food has come from farm to fork, if you like. So, why is it a food safety issue? Well, if we don't know where our food has come from, how do we know that it has been handled in accordance with hygiene law? How do we know that it complies with the contaminants and composition and other requirements of food standards law? How do we know that it's been imported lawfully in accordance with import law? Traceability provides assurances on all of this. So, I have a little matrix behind me, looks like Blockbuster's matrix, if those are old enough to remember that. And I'm just going to run through the basic principles of traceability, starting with a middle block, which is the general food requirement for traceability. Now, this applies across the board. This applies to all food businesses. So what you'll see, it's a one step forward, one step back approach. What does that mean? Well, what it means in practice, if you're a food business and you're supplying other food businesses, that's the one step forward. You need to be able to demonstrate who you've supplied your food to. If you're a food business, then you must be able to demonstrate where you got your food and ingredients from. That's the one step back. For many retail businesses, that's the only one that will apply, because if you're just a retail shop supplying the final consumer, you don't have to demonstrate who you're supplying, only those businesses who have supplied you. Why would you have to do that? Well, it all ties in with other requirements. For example, product withdrawal, product recall, which there are separate videos on. But essentially, if something's wrong with your food, then if you know who you've supplied it to in terms of business customers, then you can get it back off the market. If you know where it came from, then the competent authorities, the local authorities, can investigate back to the source of the food. So you can see that. But it's not just that. As I said in my opening remarks, by you making sure that traceability is in place as a business, you're actually assuring yourself that your food, when it arrives in your hands, meets the requirements of food law. So there we are, that's the general requirement. That will apply across the board to all foodstuffs placed on the market. But there are some specific additional requirements that go a little bit above and beyond. The first one, food of animal origin. Now there are two different issues here. Let's deal with the more straightforward one, if you like. If you're a food business and you are supplying products of animal origin to other food businesses, but you're a little butcher shop or a delicatessen and you're supplying a small amount of products of animal origin locally, for example. So in other words, all you're doing is you're not an approved establishment, but what you're doing is just supplying just day-to-day produce. Now, in addition to your one step forward, one step back, you will also have to comply with additional products of animal origin rules of traceability. Now, these require essentially the details that you would normally have on a delivery note to be made available to the competent authority, the local authority, on demand. So, if I'm a small delicatessen and I'm supplying a local restaurant with some cooked ham, then when I supply the cooked ham, I need to supply the following information. I need to supply details of who I am, which is fair enough, and who they are. If I'm supplying it via an intermediary, if I'm supplying it via a cold store, for example, I need to include that detail. I need to identify what the product is in terms of quantity, a description of it, and it needs to have a unique reference. And we need to have the date of the transaction as well. Now, this doesn't have to be written down, but it does need to be made available. So I said, if you're supplying a delivery note to your customer, your wholesale customer, well then that's brilliant, because that would have all that information on it. It's just a matter of course you would want that, so make sure they pay you. If you're emailing them, that's fine. If you're texting them, that's fine. As long as that information is retrievable, but it must be retrievable. So just a phone call and just walking around up there with all your information in your head is not acceptable in law. So it must be made available to the inspecting officer if they inquire. So that's the general requirement. That will apply to transactions of products of animal origin. So meat, fish, dairy, eggs, whatever, from one establishment to another. But you may have seen my main video, the 100 food law topics. You may have watched the video on approved establishments, and you'll know that certain approved establishments who are placing products of animal origin on the wholesale market will need approval from the food authority. If you're a fresh meat slaughterhouse or a fresh meat cutting plant, you'll need approval from the Food Standards Agency or from Food Standards Scotland. If you're a supplier of products of animal origin, like meat, like cooked ham, for example, but you're not supplying a small amount locally, you're supplying a large amount locally or a small amount nationally, you will need to be approved before you can do that. When you're approved, you'll be given an approval number. And in the case of fresh meats, like a slaughterhouse or cutting plant, that approval number will be stamped in an oval by a meat inspector on every carcass and every significant primary cut, they call them, the big cuts of meat. Now that number is your approval number. That's unique to you. If it's been issued to you by the Food Standards Agency or Food Standards Scotland, if that carcass turns up anywhere in the UK, the official inspectors can look at that and they can go straight back to you, because that's your unique number in the health mark. The health mark being an oval, GB, and a number. If you're making pots of yogurts or cooked ham or cheese or something like that, then on your packaging you'll be putting an identification mark, and that's an oval with GB, 2 letters and a number. The 2 letters refer to the local authority who has approved you. The number refers to your unique approval number. So in terms of traceability, if someone places on the market a pot of yogurt, it will have an oval on that label somewhere. It'll have GB, or UK or United Kingdom. It will have 2 letters, the local authority where it was responsible for enforcing or approving that establishment, and it'll have a unique code which will identify that establishment. So that is the approval requirement, to have either a health mark for fresh meat carcasses and primal cuts, or an identification mark. And that is enhanced traceability, because the local authorities can look at your yogurt and go straight back to you, rather than have to go through the supply chain. So that's products, foods of animal origin. We then have food information, so food labelling and information provided by social media or websites. It's all the same law. In food labelling, there is a requirement on a pre-packed food to identify the food business operator or the person who imported the food. But the food business operator identified is the one responsible for marketing the food. So in law, if you're making pots of yogurt for a supermarket, say for Tesco, then you will make the pots of yogurt, but it'll be Tesco's name and address on the label. However, remember, by supplying someone like Tesco's, you would need approval. So there would also be that identification mark on the label, which would be the oval and will identify your establishment. So the competent authorities, the local authorities, if they needed to look and find out where that yogurt came from, they'd look at the label and it would say Tesco stores, whatever, but they'd look on the label somewhere else, see the identification mark and go straight back to you. So food information does provide traceability, but in some cases, in things like own brand foods, it's not going to be complete traceability. It will be traceability to the customer, if you like, the person responsible for marketing the food. But there are other traceability requirements within food information law, depending on the nature of the product. They really relate to the origin of food, and I deal with that on a separate webinar. Right, next one on the list is fish labelling. Fish labelling, if you're selling fresh fish, like in a supermarket, for example, then you are required at point of sale to provide information to the consumer about the name, so the legal name of the fish, the method of catch, so how it's been caught, like by line or by trawl or whatever, and lastly, the catch area. Now, the catch area is a sort of traceability requirement because it will identify where in the world that fish has come from. The catch area is a standard specification. You're given little numbers and you must use those catch areas specified in law. You don't just make them up. Okay, it's a bit oblique, if you like, because it only brings it to that particular region. But remember, this is a bolt-on. There is still the general one step forward, one step back approach to traceability that will also apply. In terms of the fish, yes, you will also have to provide the delivery note type, because that will apply to approved establishments as well, the delivery note type information. Plus, you will have supplied someone like a supermarket, you'll be approved. So therefore, the identification mark would have been on the packaging of the fish. So there's lots of traceability issues there applying to the fish requirement. We then have beef labelling. Now the same thing applies. Beef being supplied to a butcher shop, will if it's in a carcass or a primal cut, it will have the health mark on it, so we'll have that. We'll have the additional requirement for the delivery note that I described for products of animal origin. It will also have the one step forward, one step back. So you've got a whole bunch of traceability requirements already. But in addition to that, there are extra requirements for beef and veal. And there's a separate video which deals with this in a bit more detail, but you have to identify where the beef was born, the cattle was born, reared, slaughtered in, and include the approval numbers of any relevant establishments there. So it might have been slaughtered in one slaughterhouse, then cut in another establishment. So you've got full traceability. And in butcher shops, for example, they need to make sure that individual lots of beef are kept separate. So if there's a need to identify and trace back one particular line of beef, it should be able to, the competent authorities should be able to do that. We then have imported food. Remember, if you're importing products of animal origin from a country outside the European Union, or the UK, so not the EU these days, just force a habit, that one, outside the UK, then the country who supplies us must be approved. The establishment producing the products of animal origin must be approved by the competent authority in that country. And the same rules apply. They will apply an identification mark, or fresh meat carcasses a health mark, to identify the traceability of that. But in addition to that, on import, there'll be a requirement for a health certificate signed off by the competent authorities. That will then come into a border control post, a port of entry that's specifically been approved to inspect such foods for import controls. And in order to facilitate that, the importer will notify the port using the IPAF system, another video on that one, and the CHED, the Common Health Entry Document, another video on that one as well, will be generated, which once fully endorsed is a record of the checks performed at the point of import, and that will accompany the imported products of animal origin to its first destination in land. So another additional traceability requirement, and that needs to be held there. That demonstrates to the official inspectors inland that that product of animal origin from a third country has been imported legitimately. So of course, supply from one establishment or imported food, all the other issues will still apply, the one step forward, one step back, and the food of animal origin, and all the other requirements as required. Lastly, we have organic food. Now with organic food, the only way you can really demonstrate and have full confidence that a food is organic is by proper traceability. Now, organic establishments would typically be certified for the purpose of the organic standard that they're trying to achieve. If it's imported, to be certificates of origin, that they've actually been properly inspected at point of import. You'll also find that with organic foods, there are restrictions on the labelling in terms of, well, what you can call organic. So organic food, you can only really demonstrate it's organic if you've got proper traceability throughout the food supply chain. Okay, look, that's just a very quick introduction to traceability. There's a lot more to it, and if you subscribe to our website, well, you can spend an hour going through the detail and the legal references. Thank you for watching this one. This is just one out of 100 videos that I'm doing, so I'm not sure what the next one is, but please stay tuned. Thanks for watching.